for another week of the Freedom Train. I'm Joseph Ward, and today we got a special guest host with us today. Mr. Irvin is a little under the weather, but we decided to bring in his better half, Miss Tammie Houston Irvin. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the world, Miss Tammie.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, ma'am. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How about yourself, Joe?
Man, I'm great, blessed, and happy to have you here. If Patrick can't be here, I'm glad you're here.
Great. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, ma'am. So how have things been going with you?
Things have been going good. I mean, we're getting UI going and just trying to keep the train moving forward.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, you know, today another great day, another great show we're going to have. We have a special guest, Mr. Victor Williams is with us today. So I'm going to read a little bit information about Mr. Victor Williams, get everybody more acquainted with him, and then we're going to start with our question and answer. So he created and implemented the only summer mentoring program within the Gaston County system during the summer of 2000 at the Quincy Educational Academy. He obtained experience in dealing with families in crisis. He obtained internships that allowed hands-on experience in counseling clients in day-to-day operations at a mental health facility. He volunteered with the Juvenile Department of Justice in Tallahassee, Florida. He counseled at-risk youth in one-on-one and group counseling sessions. He worked as a substitute teacher within the Leon County School Board system. He's been a medical social work intern at the Tallahassee Memorial Hospital, where he counseled patients, planned discharges, referred patients that needed services, and connected patients with community resources. He was a counselor with the Tallahassee Supervised Visitation, where he supervised and observed parents in their relationship with their children during 2-hour sessions. He's worked as a teen child program intern, a public defender intern within the Tallahassee Public Defender Office. He was a therapeutic counselor at This Village within Woodfield, Florida, where he worked with youth individually and in the group setting to help mentally retarded juveniles in the program to become competency to stand trial for their offenses. He was a teen child social services coordinator with the Tallahassee Public Defender's Office, and he currently works as a social service coordinator within the Tallahassee Public Defender's Office. I present to you all today Mr. Victor Williams. How are you doing today, Mr. Victor?
Hey, I'm doing good, my brother. I'm doing well, man. Love this, what you all doing today, man, but I'm doing well.
Man, we appreciate you. We're happy to have you. What you say, Miss Tammie?
Resume. That is quite a resume. I would
yes,
say that's
ma'am.
a hell of a
yes,
resume.
Ma'am.
I can curse, right? Just a little bit.
Man, he's done a lot, huh?
Yeah, man. Hey, I appreciate that, but, you know, just feel like all that, man, just was accumulation of God word, man. That's all, man. You know, just life experiences and just, you know, just trying to, you know, figure out the best way, you know, God could use me to help more people, man. That's what we all about.
Yes, sir. We definitely appreciate it. So, Tammie, why don't you go ahead and kick off with the first question so we can get this train rolling.
Right. Let's start with first question. What is a mental health coordinator? You know, people think mental health, they think, you know, schizophrenia and bipolarism. Is that all to the job, or is it more than that?
It's a lot more than that. You know, I think that when people think of mental health, there's a very big stigma, you know, attached to, you know, mental health in general. You know, and you're right. Most people automatically, you know, go to the deep end, you know, part of the mental health system in regards to diagnosis of schizophrenia, bipolar, mania, and those types of disorders. But, you know, a lot of times, you know, we deal with, you know, a lot of clients that have other issues like they could have been abused physically or sexually and have, you know, things like post-traumatic stress syndrome. You know, those are things that, you know, are prevalent amongst, you know, a lot of the armed forces, you know, in the military, you know, folks that come back a lot of times. You know, it can be something, you know, as minimal as, you know, depression. I think, you know, most normal people, they wouldn't consider themselves, you know, being mentally ill. But, I mean, there's just been a study done where roughly a third of the population in the United States, through the course of their lifetime, will have some kind of, mental health disorder. And if you were to know people, personally that, they may go through rough times, death in the family, things like that. And sometimes they become withdrawn, and those are things that myself and others in the justice system, we try to identify and try to make sure that folks receive the help that they need, because we all know wherever the mind go, your body's gonna follow. So we just try to make sure that folks are channeling in the right direction with getting the help they need.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very important topic, because like we're all in agreement with, mental health is a stigma, stigmatized within especially the Black community. That's something that we really don't deal with. We don't talk about. It seems like people only focus on things like HIV/AIDS and cancer and things, but something like mental health, especially mental health within the justice system, nobody is talking about. So, we appreciate your services and your work. So.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I think, again, it's a lot of folk out here that, that need help, and, what we try to do is link them to the resources that, that they can afford, that are culturally competent, and, can really, help them with, whatever issues they're dealing with, so they can be, a whole person.
Okay. The next question is, in your opinion, why is it important to have a mental health coordinator within the public defender's office?
Well, there are many reasons. The ones that I think that are the most important, though, is if you think about it, like I said, I just mentioned statistic that 1/3 of the 1/3 of the population in the United States, in their lifetime is gonna suffer some sort of mental illness. Well, since there is a stigma attached to mental illness, what ends up happening, right? Sometimes it's not diagnosed properly. People don't seek the resources. They don't know of the resources, or may not have the money to pay for the resources that exist, right? Mm-hmm. So it's good for, us to have, someone that understands mental health in the public defender's office, because we're able to basically create a narrative, right, or create the appropriate narrative for the client. You may have a client that, like the young lady was saying earlier, that may be, for example, schizophrenic, and the family is always known that, the client hallucinates, hears voices, those kind of things, but they may have not known about the resources that were available and couldn't afford them. What I try to do is I try to make sure that our attorneys and our investigators and our staff are trained to really understand and recognize and analyze the clients that may have a mental health disorder, so we're able to get them evaluated, we're able to get them stabilized on their medication, we're able to make the appropriate referrals and that kind of thing, to make sure that, and in the court system, and this is very important too, there's only when you're looking at statutes and how sentences are given, there's very few things that are called mitigators, and those are things that will allow the judge to depart from the minimum sentencing guidelines. Well, mental health is one of those things, and so, whenever we can, show the court that the client does have an issue, he'll be able to consider that when they're thinking about sentences, and oftentimes they get, more lenient sentences.
Okay. That's very important. What you think, Tammie?
I think, we're going through these questions, and he's just moving right through them. I mean, he's already answered, why it's important to have a public defender and how effective the public defenders are. And, so for me, I'm just like, okay, well, what's the next step, which is basically what are the challenges that come along with working as a mental health coordinator. And how does that play into what you're doing when it comes down to the court system and making sure that you're there as far as being like a litigator?
Well, I think what you're asking is what are some of the problems, within the criminal justice system itself, as far as what I see with trying to coordinate services for clients and analyzing them correctly?
Yes, sir. Most definitely.
Okay. Well, you know, the truth of the matter is most people in general are not, familiar with psychopathology. They don't understand mental health. So, one of the challenges, for me, and I think a lot of the folks in the mental health profession is that we have to continuously educate lawyers and judges. When a person goes to law school, they don't take classes in mental health. Although, probably, if you work with indigent clients or poor clients, about a third of the clients, that come in are going to have some mental health issues. That's why we always get evaluations to see if clients are competent to stand trial or if they're not guilty by reason of insanity. So we know that the criminal justice system has, and as a matter of fact, the Department of Corrections in the state of Florida, right, for example, we have more severely mentally ill clients in prison than we do in our state hospital settings, right? And that's because the court system and the, judges and the attorneys, they really don't understand mental health. So, what I try to do is just educate and meet with county officials, judges, state attorneys, public defenders, and private attorneys, just to kind of reiterate to them how important it is, for them to, understand what mental illness is. Think about it. If you have a client that is schizophrenic and that client gets a felony battery charge, right? Well, if you know that this client is schizophrenic, then that may have some bearing on how you look at that particular client, right? But first, you have to, make sure that you get the proper assessment done. And that is what is considered to me, smart justice. And, that's, the approach that, not just myself, but a lot of the mental health community are trying to do to, involve ourselves a lot more in the criminal justice system.
Okay. And like I say, that's very important information, and that leads me to my next question. And do you think black males with mental health issues are incarcerated at a higher rate than other males of other races?
I think so. And, I don't have no statistics in front of me, but, just, through my experience, I would imagine that would be the case. And the reason why that would be the case is because, unfortunately, and everything is always goes back to the bottom line if you look at numbers, and everything. But, African Americans, we're disproportionately, unemployed, right? And what goes along with that? Sometimes we don't have money or any insurance or, know where to go for the resources and everything. So, I think a lot of times, we just have to just do a better job with educating our people. Our community, we always try to deal with everything internally, and we, have ambivalence to try to really go and ask for help. And, we have to understand that we love each other, and that it's, folks that, like I said, that are culturally competent, that, can help guide and lead, families to, the appropriate resources so, their children and their family members can, live healthy, productive, successful lives and everything. If you think about it, even in, everybody that's listening and, including you all, in your own family, you may know folk that are, mentally ill, and you will know if they're off their medication.
Right.
And, and just think about, all the folk that, that don't have their medications, and, they act out and they have sometimes aggressive behaviors, mood swings, and those kind of things that, end up, being a criminal charge, but, the charge is really symptomatic to the underlying mental health issue. So, from just a criminal justice standpoint, I think that, if, some of the mental health issues are addressed, many of the clients that are in prison right now, or in jail, they'll be, at home, with their families, and, with their children. And that's what that's what we need to see.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, just like you started off by saying, where the mind goes, the body will follow. I mean, I don't think people take into consideration overall, the mental state of people, especially when it comes to unemployment. And then when you talk about, in white corporate America, when a lot of people like get laid off, and then you have these people that shoot up places, and the first thing they want to say is, oh, well, so-and-so, they just had this going on, but you never know what that person's trigger is. So I think in corporate America, they should be taught, to look for signs like that, because you might have to handle that employee different when you let them go or when you let them off, And then, like you said, the jailhouse is like housing these people when they could be at home with their families. I mean, when you think about Black America and you think about the state of the Black man being the head, being the provider,
there you go.
When they lose their job, that's enough to make them go crazy, I mean, and
Correct.
I mean crazy in the sense of, not trying to give.
Yeah, we're with you. We're with you.
Not trying to give, I guess, credence to mental health in general, but it's just when you take that away, especially from a Black man, it just makes it so much harder. They're not taught how to cope effectively. They're just taught to, be all that they can be as the Black man, as the household, as the provider. But when you take that away from them and you don't supplement anything else, what do you leave them with?
Correct. I think, one of the things that, I think is very important is that, if you think about it, when we go and get a health screening, right, if we're not feeling, well, we'll go and see the medical doctor, and, they'll check, our whole body. If we have dental issues, we'll go see the dentist. We have vision problems, we'll go and see the optometrist, right? We're going to, go and see those doctors. But rarely when we, are going through something, will we go and see a psychologist, or a mental health professional. Right. And, that's probably the most important part of your body is your mind.
Exactly.
And if you're not healthy mentally, then you really can't, think clearly or function, able to, make, appropriate, decisions, and, it affects everything. So, I think that, folk really need to understand the importance of mental health and how that plays probably the largest part of, just your well-being in general.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. If I could just, add to that, I think Patrick was saying one day that Black men have like one of the highest suicide rates, I think. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I have heard that. And I wouldn't say that they're the highest, but it is spiking. And a lot of it, is a result of, a lot of things that you just talked about. It's hard out here in this world.
Right, and it's a certain age group too. It's like usually what, like 18 to 30 or something?
Yeah, it is the younger population. And, a lot of that, again, it has to do with, you have to think about it, and it's primarily males. And what ends up happening, we don't have that modeling, right? A lot of, our parents, and grandparents, they're not with us, for whatever reason. So, when they're in that age range and they have to deal with life, and then you have the disproportionalities in regards to, criminal charges. You may, not be able to be employed. You may have, again, these mental health issues. So it's just a myriad of issues that, really, affects, a young man, in this world. And, if we don't have the proper guidance, and folks around that we can model and, be able to emulate and talk to what they call the OGs and be able to, just get, good information at critical times, then, you ain't no telling, how folk, a person may act when they run into a situation.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I guess let me ask this question then. Why do you think it's so hard for, especially the Black community, to talk about mental health issues?
Well, in general, I think that people don't like to talk about things that they don't understand or know. Most people they understand, and it would what we would consider in academia called lay folk, right? They really don't understand what mental health means and everything. It's kind of like finances or money, right? In Black America, we don't talk a lot about money and banking and credit and all that because, a lot of us really don't understand that, and that's taboo, even though we use it every day. Mental health is the same thing. It's just something that folk are scared of because they don't understand it. But, the good thing about mental health is that, it's treatable. It's something that, data and science has shown that, when you're talking about mental health, we understand that it's, your brain chemistry, right? And if your brain chemistry can be treated and you can live a successful life, then, I think that, again, when it goes back to your well-being and everything, if you can, get people to understand and just, reiterate that it's okay, it's treatable, it's something just like diabetes, for example, right? We all know, have family members that may be diabetic. As long as they take their insulin and take their medication, they're fine. When they don't take their medication, it's going to be an issue. So, it's not anything to be afraid of or anything to be, taboo about. It's just the reality, and we have to make, the appropriate decisions, for our family members to make sure that, they're the absolute best person that they can be.
Right. Okay.
Right. So I guess, Vic, let me tie these two questions in together. Since you're dealing with the judicial system, what advice, I guess these can go hand in hand. What advice would you give somebody working with a public defender to have a successful trial? And even in that within itself, if you had the power to change the justice system in regards to mental health, what would you change?
Okay. Well, let me try to answer the first one. What advice would I give someone about that's working with a public defender to have a successful trial?
Implementing, if they have mental health issues, like you're talking about these developmental disturbances, because it's not just schizophrenia, it's not just bipolarism.
Correct. Correct.
Sometimes it goes, deeper than that.
Yeah, it could be developmental delays.
Yeah,
right. It
exactly.
could be. You're right. Exactly. I think it's always uncomfortable for people to be honest about their disabilities, but I think that one of the challenges that we have in our office is family members being transparent. When incidents happen and we get assigned to the case, a lot of times we're not aware that a client may have mental health issues, and the client may not tell us because they're embarrassed or they're ashamed that they don't know what advantages, in regards to their criminal case that exists, and so we try to encourage and tell the family to be honest, tell us the truth. If we say, hey, and we ask a question about, the client's mental health, let us know about what happened to them when they were in school, if they had any special needs services or anything like that, or if they ever had any behavioral issues or, strange behaviors, in the home and everything, because that can kind of, shed light and allow us to create the appropriate narrative for their family member and be able to get them, a better sentence. Now, what was the other question?
Say, if you had the power to change anything about the justice system, what would you change?
If I had the power to change anything in the justice system, I think I would probably change the funding levels. I think that, especially for, the Office of the Public Defender, and, to you all in your audience, is no big secret. The attorneys, they have heavy caseloads, and, that impacts, time that, the investigators and the attorneys can, spend on cases. So if I could change anything, I would certainly probably increase the funding so that we can get, more attorneys, more investigators, more social workers, just more people on the front line that can actually, work these cases and try to make sure that everyone is getting 100%, full representation. Now, by saying that, I'm not saying that the Public Defender's Office don't provide great representation, but we all know if you're an attorney or you just working doing anything and you got 50 cases as opposed to 10, right? Which case, person you think going to be more thorough, right? So, it's just all about numbers and dollars and cents. So, if I had a magic wand, I wish, I can, just increase the funding so we can get more staff and be able to thoroughly, work every case like it was somebody in your own family.
Okay. Well, I got a quick question. It's off the grid a little bit with a quick question. Do you think that there are effective preventive, like life coaching and prevention interventions within the justice system that you work within? Like, if there are some, do you think they are effective?
As far as I know, I am not aware of any life coaching type programs that's involved in the criminal justice system at all. I know that a lot of times, because you got to think about it, a client gets charged, right, and they get charged with battery. So if they get a battery charge, they got to do anger management. If they get a drug charge, they got to, go to drug treatment. But there's nothing that really talks about life skills, the things that probably would help with a lot of the younger population that the young lady was just discussing in regards to the suicide rate. That life skills, training, I think, would address potentially some issues in regards to mental health, teaching people how to, address situations and make, good decisions in regards to their life. There's nothing more valuable in life than peace of mind. And if you're a person that, that's out here and you're trying to find your way and you don't have anyone that kind of can teach you, different strategies to be successful in life, then, you're going to run up, against some obstacles, when they occur. So, but no, I wish that there was funding and programs, and I take that back, because everybody always want to tap, and attach everything with funding, but we as people, we know what's needed, right, and we know what exists, and so I just wish that from just a grassroots level that communities just decide that they want to take responsibility and share their time and their knowledge, with anybody that's willing to sit down and listen and learn. You know, back in the old days, you know, we used to always sit around, you know, the old barrel, you know, that was on fire, you know, and they used to, you know, have a barrel fire and sit around and they'd drink some beer and, you know, sit around and talk. But it was value in that because, you know, these old school guys, these G's, you know, they you know, what they would call kicking game. You know, they'll kick game to you and just tell you about life lessons and things they went through and everything. And so you gain wisdom and knowledge and just spiritual growth from that. You know what I mean? And you mature, you know, just as a person. But, you know, that's something that, because a lot of these guys, you know, in the criminal justice system, they're just young, immature guys. You know, like they you know, they need that guidance.
Right. Definitely missing that. So we're gonna wrap this up, and the last question, but I feel like you've answered all these questions, and you know, so eloquently, above and beyond. I mean, like every time I'm ready to ask a question, like you've already hit my question. So the last question was actually, if you were the president of Black America, what would you change and what message would you give? So I'm just going to twist that a little bit because I think you've pretty much answered that, and not to necessarily be the president of Black America, but as a person in your profession, what, you know, like what are your closing words? Like what do you have for the people? What's...
Man, that question right there is so poignant because, I mean, I just want my people to know that, you know, it's a lot of folk out here that love y'all, and we really, you know, want to do, and we're trying to, you know, do our best to look out. But you all have to come to us and, you know, let us know, you know, what some of your issues are. And I want, you know, more of us to do exactly what we're doing right now, to have dialogue and fellowship with each other and, you know, just love each other and try to help, you know, each other as much as possible because we all know, you know, that, you know, stacked against us and, you know, we understand, you know, a lot of the obstacles, but I think that, you know, we people of God, you know, he has favor for us. And, you know, I think that, you know, we could just all humble ourselves and just be obedient and do, you know, what God intended us to do for our people. I think that, you know, because we've done some great things, but I feel that, you know, there's, you know, especially with a lot of the incidents that are happening up north and, you know, folks are shedding light on, you know, issues with, you know, policing and stuff that we all know affect Black families and everything. I think that a new day is coming, and I think that, you know, the second wave of the civil rights movement, you know, is probably underway, and, you know, I'm just glad that I'm here to see it and to be a part of it, and, you know, just want everybody to join.
Right. So
okay, so Go ahead, Joe.
No, you straight. Go ahead.
Okay, so like I'm such a girl, and you really made me cry, like tear up when you said, "I just want them to know that we love you." I think, you know, so much of that has gotten lost. You know, that was an open and honest answer. You know, like we don't get that anymore. I love you. You know, from one brother to another. You know, it's always no homo. But let's be real. Like I love you. You are me. I am you. You know, we are we. You know. So I mean, I think that last answer was just simply beautiful. If I could say so myself. I am a girl, so I'm kind of, you know. No, I was really like teary-eyed. But
But what you're saying, what you're saying is true though, because as males, we concentrate so hard on being tough. You know, we got to be that dominant man. Everybody's concentrating on being that. Won't spend enough time, you know, loving each other. Like you said, we can't. We so stuck on image that we can't just say it to a friend or show our friend love without, if we have to use the statement "no homo," that means something wrong, you know.
Right. Right. So we're gonna wrap it up. If you're okay with that, Brother Joe.
Yeah. We're gonna what we're gonna do now. We're gonna transition. So we're still gonna be recording, but we're just gonna shut down the live port session of this, so we can, if anybody has any questions, they can be able to ask their questions without feeling any pressure or anything. So we basically go ahead and transition right now. Before we go, Mr. Victor, can you give us a way that we can contact you? What's your you got a website, email address, anything that people can contact you to be able to get information more information on mental health and how to navigate the justice system?
Oh, yes, sir. I can be reached. I'm gonna do two. I'm gonna give you my office number and my email. My office number is area code 850-606-1072.
1072.
Yes, and my email address is victor.williams@FL, P as in Paul, D as in dog, the number 2.com.
FL. Can you say the last part for me one more time? I'm sorry.
FL, P as in Paul, D as in dog, the number 2.com.
All right. Reiterate that for you all. His office number is 850-606-1072. His email is Victor, VICTOR, .Williams, WILLIAMS, @FL, P as in Paul, D as in dog, the number 2.com. Reach out to him and get this information, because brother brought the fire today, and he has information that we all could use. So once again, Victor, we appreciate you, giving us your time and your information, and you giving us something to think about and a platform to move forward with, because you're definitely a resource in the community that people should be able to reach out to, and people need to reach out to, because we have a lot of our young men who really need your help. So I appreciate you. Tammie, anything else you want to say before we transition?
No, I appreciate you as well. I really do. The meeting number is 619-364. Is that right, Joe? Oh no.
Yeah.
It's 712-775-7031. Again, 712-775-7031. Call us.
Right, we're going to go ahead and transition, and we appreciate you all for joining us, and we love y'all, and we see y'all next week, same time on the Freedom Train.